This video is going to be the 1 inch wide seam. For this sample, you'll need 2 pieces of muslin. Notice this sort of frayed edge. For these samples, you might want to take a pair of scissors and trim that off and make it clean as cut as possible. Or just cut a piece at 3 inches by 6 inches. Make sure you have clean edges for these seam samples. We want that versus that. Now for these, you'll be laying the pieces of fabric together, one on top of the other like I've done here, and lining them up perfectly and sewing. But first you need to know where to sew. So you'll take your fabric, do this on a table, not on the machine. I'm just trying to keep the video visible for y'all. Actually, let me do it this way. I'll move my machine out of the way. Here are my 2 pieces. If I want a 1 inch seam, I will take my ruler and using the grid, I will line up that cut edge at 1 inch. See how this is 1 inch wide here? I've got my fabric right under there, you can see through. That means this is 1 inch wide, so I'll draw a line. That gives me a nice seam line to follow. Take a few pins. I recommend putting one through the end and one through the bottom. And you can pin along this line to keep things straight. Now, if we had a line on the back side of this fabric, you'd want this pin to line up with that line. But for our sample, we just need the line on one side. Once you're pinned and ready to go, get your machine ready. And we'll sew it right on that line. Make sure your machine is set for the straight stitch. That's stitch width 0, stitch length 3. And since this is a seam, we're going to want to backstitch at either end. The backstitch uses this little lever here. Don't forget about that. So, I'm ready to sew. I should be able to just press the pedal, take a few stitches, and you want to backstitch by holding down the lever, and then sew forward. We'll also backstitch at the bottom end. Now as you come up to your pin, you can pull that out of the way. You'll notice I sewed over the pins that are across. You can do that, just be careful not to hit them with the needle. And here at the bottom, I'll backstitch a few stitches. And we're done. Take your pins out. And you have sewn a 1 inch seam. That is 1 inch of seam allowance. You can open it up like that. And there, you see you sewed it together. Now the next step is to go over to the iron and press this seam allowance open. So you'll lay it like that and you'll run the iron right across here. That you'll have a very nice, professionally sewn 1 inch seam.